What if I told you that what most people call motivation isn't real? That the fire they chase, the rush, the hype, the noise, it dies as fast as it comes. Because motivation is a spark. Stoicism, though. Stoicism is the forge. The Stoics didn't rise because they were inspired. They rose because they were disciplined. They didn't talk about feelings. They acted in alignment with truth. That is why people today mistake Stoic strength for motivation. Because it looks powerful. It feels deep. But it is not a feeling. It is a system, a way of life, a code of the mind. And when you master it, you stop needing motivation altogether. Because you've built something stronger, command over yourself. You see, motivation whispers, "I feel like it." Stoicism says, do it anyway. Motivation depends on mood. Stoicism depends on reason. That is why when motivation fades, and it always fades, the Stoic keeps moving. Not out of excitement, but out of choice. That is what most people don't understand. They think these 9 Stoic tactics are about feeling good, but they're not. They're about becoming good. Regardless of how you feel. Music grows heavier, slow drumbeat, cold wind between lines. The Stoics didn't wait for inspiration. They also didn't wait for perfect timing, or the perfect mood, or perfect certainty. They lived as if every moment was borrowed, because it is. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do, say, and think." That is not motivation. That is mortality. And it is the ultimate discipline. When you remember how fragile life is, you stop wasting it. You stop waiting for the right mood, and you start to act with urgency. Not because you are motivated, but because you understand the cost of hesitation. Motivation tells you you've got time. Stoicism reminds you that you don't. Most people live like they're going to live forever. They waste days chasing feelings. The Stoic trains himself to act without needing them. He wakes up tired, still acts. He feels fear, still moves. He loses hope, still holds his ground, because his actions aren't tied to comfort, they're tied to character. And that is what the world calls motivation. But it is not hype. Music shifts, light strings join the background, a sense of clarity rising. The Stoic doesn't chase emotion, he channels it. He doesn't drown in anger, he converts it into energy. He doesn't hide from pain, he studies it. That is one of the most misunderstood Stoic tactics, turning suffering into fuel. Most people collapse under pain because they expect life to be fair. The Stoic expects pain and uses it to train. As Seneca wrote, "Difficulties strengthen the mind as labor does the body." Pain is not an interruption, it is instruction. It is the classroom of strength. The Stoic doesn't ask, "Why me?" He asks, "What is this trying to teach me?" That shift, that single question, separates the unbreakable from the unaware. Whereas motivation tells you to escape pain, Stoicism tells you to enter it, to let it sharpen, calm, and deepen you, because that is where growth will be hiding, behind discomfort. The music slows down with deep bass under a calm voice. The Stoic knows that comfort is a trap masquerading as peace. It feels safe, but it softens you. It feels relaxing, but it robs your edge. Motivation will tell you to rest when you feel like it. Stoicism says, rest with purpose, not as an escape, because every choice trains you, every reaction reflects upon you, and every moment is practice for who you are becoming. Epictetus was once a slave. His master broke his leg, but he calmly said, "You will break my body, not my spirit." That is not motivation, that is mastery, a mind that can no longer be conquered because it no longer seeks comfort or control over others, only over itself. Music deepens, faint echoes, like ancient halls. The Stoic doesn't post quotes about strength. He lives them. He doesn't talk about potential. He fulfills it quietly, repeatedly, relentlessly. That is another misunderstood tactic: silence. Stoic silence isn't weakness, it is focus. Most people mistake silence for a lack of confidence. But silence is the sound of someone working. Someone not in need of validation. Someone building peace instead of performance. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire but still wrote in private to himself. No camera, no crowd, no ego, just truth. That is Stoic energy, powerful, restrained, relentless. The world mistakes that discipline for motivation because they've forgotten what strength looks like. Real strength doesn't shout, it moves silently through storms, building what others will only understand after it is done. Music slows to near silence. Heartbeat rhythm returns. Motivation asks for results. Stoicism demands process. Motivation says, "When will this end?" Stoicism says, "This is the work." The Stoic doesn't train to achieve, he trains to become. That is why Stoicism lasts and motivation fades. Because Stoicism doesn't depend on emotion, it depends on principle. Most people want power without pain, peace without practice, clarity without chaos. But it is in friction that these things come, and the Stoic knows it. Fire doesn't fear resistance, it feeds on it. Music fades down to a quiet hum, a slow, steady voice continues. So, if you are tired of chasing motivation, perhaps it is time to train your mind like a Stoic to build habits that don't depend on how you feel. To act not because it is easy, but because it is right. That isn't motivation. That is mental evolution, because once you no longer need to feel inspired to act, you've already separated yourself from the majority of humankind. And when you begin to act out of principle rather than pleasure, you stop being temporary. You start becoming timeless. They see calm and think it is easy. They see restraint and call it control. They watch someone walk through chaos without reacting, and they say, "He is so motivated." But they're wrong. What they're seeing is mastery. The Stoic doesn't need motivation to act. He acts from clarity. He doesn't rise because he feels powerful. He rises because his principles command him to. That is what most people can't understand. Stoic action is duty, not desire. Marcus Aurelius didn't wake up every morning motivated to rule Rome. He woke up exhausted, burdened, human. Still, he wrote, at dawn, "When you have trouble getting out of bed, tell yourself, 'I have to go to work,' as a human being." He didn't hype himself up. He reminded himself of his responsibility. That is the Stoic tactic people mistake for motivation. Self-command, the ability to act without needing emotional permission. The world calls it strength. The Stoic calls it normal. Music grows deeper. Steady drumbeat, like a slow march. Motivation says, "Push harder." Stoicism says, "Push wiser." It is not about running on adrenaline. It is about running on alignment. The Stoic knows every emotion, every impulse is temporary. So he waits, he breathes, he observes. While others rush into decisions, he watches their impatience destroy them. Calm isn't laziness, it is precision. The Stoic doesn't react, he responds. And in that stillness, he gains control, not over the world, but over himself. People mistake calm for a lack of emotion. They think Stoicism is coldness, and it is not. It is awareness. The Stoic feels everything. He just doesn't obey it. He knows emotion is like weather, powerful but fleeting. You can't control the storm, but you can control how you sail. Epictetus said, "It is not things themselves that disturb us, but our opinions about them." That is the second Stoic tactic mistaken for motivation. Emotional discipline, it looks like fearlessness. But it is really management. It is understanding that emotion isn't your enemy. Instead, ignorance is. Music softens. The sound of slow rain tapping on marble. Motivation thrives on highs. Stoicism thrives in lows. Most people act when they feel inspired. The Stoic acts especially when he doesn't. He knows that consistency builds confidence, not the other way around. You act first, belief follows. You don't wait to feel strong to do hard things. You do hard things to feel strong. That is why Stoicism outlasts motivation. Because it doesn't rely on hype, it relies on habit. Modern life is built on instant dopamine, notifications, applause, achievements, tiny doses of validation that keep you chasing. But the Stoic cuts that chain by practicing detachment, the art of doing without needing a result. When he acts fully, but when the result comes, he accepts it calmly, whether it is success or failure. Marcus Aurelius said, "Never let the future disturb you. You will meet it, if you have to, with the same weapons of reason, which today arm you against the present." That is not optimism. That is preparation. Detachment isn't about caring less. It is about caring correctly. You don't live for reward. You live for alignment. Music builds slowly deep drums, slow and rhythmic. That's the third Stoic tactic that people mistake for motivation. Detachment from outcome. The world thinks the Stoic is fearless because he doesn't celebrate wins or mourn losses. But it's not because he doesn't feel, it's because he's free. He knows that if your happiness depends on the result, you'll never be free. So he shifts his focus to what he can control: effort, intention, virtue, and in doing so, he becomes unshakable. When the results are delayed, motivation dies. The Stoic doesn't die. He endures. For his purpose isn't to achieve, it is to act rightly. That is his reward. Music shifts, subtle piano, steady, reflective. The fourth Stoic tactic that people mistake for motivation is voluntary hardship. Most only push themselves when forced to. The Stoic forces himself to. Seneca slept on the floor. Marcus fasted. Epictetus practiced going without. Not because they loved suffering, but because they understand that comfort weakens the spirit. They trained for difficulty before it arrived. They didn't need motivation when life got hard. They were already hardened. You see, motivation avoids pain. Stoicism uses it. The Stoic says, "I'll suffer on purpose now, so I don't suffer in surprise later." That is mental armor. That is strength by choice, not by chance. And when life inevitably turns cruel, he is ready. Music deepens, heavy bass tone. That is what people observe when they call the Stoic motivated. They are observing someone who has prepared, a person who will not be shocked by pain or failure or rejection. Someone who has forged such a deep relationship with discomfort that it no longer frightens him. That is the secret. When you stop fearing hardship, nothing has power over you. The Stoic doesn't need external push. He depends on internal pull. His actions come from vision, not validation. And that vision is rooted in timeless principles: justice, courage, discipline, and wisdom. That is not motivation. That is architecture. The building of a mind that doesn't collapse under pressure. Music fades to a hum. Voice softens. The fire of the Stoic doesn't roar. It burns quietly, deeply, constantly. That is why people don't understand him. He doesn't need the crowd. He doesn't need the noise. His purpose is personal. His standard, internal. Motivation fades when no one's looking. Stoicism grows stronger in solitude. So when they see you acting with consistency, they will call you motivated. Let them. They won't understand that what drives you isn't emotion. It is eternity. It is the discipline to act like your life matters, even when the world forgets that it does. Most people mistake Stoic strength for motivation because they've never seen what peace looks like under pressure. They don't understand how a person can walk through storms without breaking, how a person can keep going without excitement, applause, or even hope. But that is precisely what Stoicism trains you to do, to act with excellence when everything around you is falling apart, to move not because it feels good, but because it is right. You see, the Stoic doesn't live by moods. He lives by mission. And that mission isn't loud or glamorous. It is internal, invisible. To outsiders, it looks like he is just driven. But drive fueled by emotion burns out fast. The Stoic's engine runs on something colder, purer, discipline. He is not chasing feeling. He is following reason. Music grows heavier. A deep heartbeat pulse joins beneath the words. The fifth Stoic tactic people confuse with motivation is radical acceptance. Most people spend their life fighting reality, wishing it would be easier or that the world was fair and praying for things to change. But the Stoic doesn't resist what already is. He accepts it instantly, then from that moment acts. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Love only what happens to you and what was destined for you. No greater harmony exists." Not resignation. That is command. Because when you stop arguing with reality, you start to master it. Acceptance doesn't mean liking what happened. It means using it. If you get betrayed, learn loyalty. If you fail, learn strategy. If you lose, learn detachment. The Stoic knows that every event carries two paths. One leads to pain, the other to purpose. The path one takes depends on perception. So, while others cry, "This isn't fair," the Stoic whispers, "This is training." Motivation is based on hope. Stoicism is based on truth. Music builds, low, rhythmic percussion, a slow march of patience. The sixth Stoic tactic mistaken for motivation is restraint. The ability to hold back when you could explode. The art of not reacting when you are provoked. Most people think restraint is weakness, that to stay silent is to lose. But the Stoic knows silence is strategy. Epictetus said, "Any person capable of angering you becomes your master. When you react, you hand over control. When you pause, you reclaim it." People think strength means shouting louder, fighting harder, proving your point. But real strength is refusing to be moved by chaos. The Stoic's silence is louder than noise. His calm makes others question their storms. That is why restraint looks like confidence. Because it is confidence. It is knowing you can act but choosing when, where, and how. The music slows to a low hum, like the sound of an ancient forge. The Stoic doesn't waste energy on proving himself, puts that energy into building himself. That is the difference between power and ego. Power is internal. Ego is desperate. The Stoic lives without needing to be seen. He doesn't post every victory. He doesn't argue every insult. He doesn't seek validation, because validation makes you dependent. And dependency destroys sovereignty. That is the seventh Stoic tactic mistaken for motivation. Indifference to opinion. People think not caring what others think means arrogance. But it is actually humility. It is the understanding that others' judgments are not your responsibility. You live by your principles, not their praise. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "It never ceases to amaze me. We all love ourselves more than other people, but care more about their opinion than our own." That is the trap. Trying to control what can't be controlled. The Stoic frees himself from that trap. He builds his life quietly, guided by virtue, not applause. That's why his success looks effortless, because he stopped chasing credit. He opted for clarity over approval. Music rises, soft strings, and the echo of wind. The eighth Stoic tactic mistaken for motivation is consistency. People think consistency comes from motivation. It doesn't. It comes from standards. The Stoic doesn't ask, "Do I feel like it today?" He asks, "Is this the right thing to do?" That is why he wins, because feelings fluctuate, standards don't. Most people want big results, but can't handle small repetition. They crave intensity, not endurance. But the Stoic understands, small, consistent action compounds into greatness. He builds momentum quietly, one choice at a time. That is not motivation. That is mechanics. He doesn't hype himself up. He just doesn't stop. Motivation is a spark. Consistency is the flame that survives the wind. Music shifts, the low sound of thunder in the distance. The ninth Stoic tactic people mistake for motivation service. The Stoic doesn't live for himself. He lives for duty. He serves truth, justice, virtue, the higher order of life. He sees himself as a small piece of something infinite. That's why he doesn't need reward. His purpose is contribution, Seneca said. No man can live happily who regards himself alone. The Stoic's peace comes from alignment, knowing he is part of something greater than ego, greater than survival. While others chase motivation to feel significant, the Stoic finds significance in responsibility. He doesn't ask, "What can I get?" He asks, "What can I give?" Music deepens, brass tones swell beneath quiet strength. That is why Stoic power confuses people. It looks like motivation but isn't. Motivation moves the body. Stoicism moves the soul. Motivation is about speed. Stoicism is about direction. Motivation fades with the mood. Stoicism strengthens with every hardship. And here is the truth. You don't need motivation to live well. You need reason. You need order. You need purpose so solid that it doesn't crack when life does. That is what the Stoics built. That is what you can build. Music softens to silence. The voice lowers. Stop chasing hype. Build harmony. Stop waiting to feel ready. Start acting like your actions matter. Because they do, and one day they'll call you motivated. But you'll know better. You'll know you are something rarer. You are disciplined. The Stoic doesn't care how he feels. He cares how he responds. That is why people mistake him for motivated, because they can't imagine action without emotion. But the Stoic's drive doesn't come from excitement. It comes from duty. The world waits to feel ready. The Stoic knows readiness is a trap. You will never feel ready to face loss, failure, rejection, or pain. And that is precisely why you must. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." The Stoic takes that literally. Every time life hits, he turns inward and asks, "What is still mine to command?" That is where his focus lives. Not in outcomes, not in people, not in chance, but in self-direction. That is why he seems unstoppable. Because he never wastes energy fighting what he can't change. He fights only the inner war, the one between reason and reaction. Music deepens, a soft bass hum under slow drums. The Stoic doesn't chase success. He trains himself to deserve it. That is another difference between motivation and mastery. Motivation wants to win fast. Stoicism plays forever. Because Stoicism doesn't measure victory in applause or achievement, it measures it in alignment. Are you living by your values? Are you acting with integrity? Are you calm in the storm? If the answer is yes, then you've already won. No matter what happens outside. Most call that mindset grind, but the Stoic isn't grinding for validation. He is building his soul. He is sharpening his will. Every repetition, every early morning, every cold shower, every moment of self-restraint is practice for life itself. Because life isn't soft. Life doesn't care if you are tired, anxious, or hurt. It demands that you show up anyway, and the Stoic doesn't argue. You are so motivated. They see calm and mistake it for ease. They see consistency and mistake it for passion. But inside, it is neither. It is practice. Years of training, thousands of repetitions, all leading to one truth. The Stoic doesn't rise because he feels ready. He rises because he refuses to fall asleep on his life. Music softens, piano enters, slow and reflective. Motivation ends when the emotion fades. Stoicism begins when the emotion fades. That is the shift. The Stoic doesn't burn out because he isn't burning anything. His flame is controlled. Not a wildfire of emotion, but a steady lantern of awareness. It doesn't flare, it guides. The Stoic recognizes that the only true freedom is self-command. You can't control what people think. You can't control what fate brings, but you can always control how you face it. That is sovereignty, and that is what Stoicism offers. Freedom not from life, but within it. Music grows. Then steadies, a balance between light and dark tones. You don't need to be motivated to be unshakable. You need to be a master. And mastery doesn't come from being fired up. It comes from endurance. It comes from choosing calm in chaos, patience in pain, reason in rage. It is built one decision at a time, quietly, endlessly, purposefully. Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, Epictetus. They didn't live easy lives, but they lived intentional ones. They suffered betrayal, loss, exile, and death, yet they remained composed, not because they didn't feel, but because they chose not to be owned by what they felt. That is the power of philosophy. Not to escape life, but to engage with it fully and still remain free. Music slows, gentle wind, and a final deep hum. Stoicism is not motivation, it's liberation. It doesn't promise pleasure. It offers peace. It doesn't guarantee success. It guarantees self-respect. And that's something no failure can steal. So the next time you see someone living with calm, consistency, and courage, don't call it motivation. Call it mastery. Call it philosophy in motion. Call it what it truly is, the discipline of a mind that no longer bows to chaos. It is because the Stoic doesn't need the world to be easier, he needs only himself to be wiser. And when he does, the storms can come, and he'll keep on walking, quiet, focused, and unmoved. That is the truth the Stoics lived and died for. You don't need motivation to move mountains. You just need to stop needing to feel ready. The rest is training.